In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, Minister Hakimi, Minister Hassan, Chairman Muslimyar, distinguished guests, members of the cabinet, governors, ambassadors, heads of agencies, all our guests, and ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this senior officials meeting. Your presence here is not just substantive, but highly symbolic. Your decision to come at a time after Kabul has been in mourning is an act of empathy, understanding, sympathy, and commitment. On behalf of the state, the nation, in all segments of public opinion, civil society, the ulama, and the women of Afghanistan, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Friends in need or friends indeed, and you're showing your presence that you are indeed in our needs with us, and together we can stand tall and face all the challenges that confront us. We have an exciting day ahead of us. This will be the first opportunity since London where Dr. Abdullah and I first presented our self-reliance reform strategy, to have an open and candid discussion with our international partners. And I do emphasize, open and candid. Open in the sense that there are fundamental questions where early closure will not be helpful. Candid because mutual accountability demands candidness. And we should not shy away from grading our efforts, particularly that of the government, because a government elected by the people and bound by them needs to be evaluated, and evaluated clearly in order to have benchmarks to see how we are changing and how we are delivering. In London, we were a new government. Today, we are a fully formed administration. Our speakers and panelists are Afghanistan's best and brightest leaders. You will have many interesting discussions over the course of the day. But for Dr. Abdullah and myself, the most interesting part of all would be to watch our government of national unity demonstrate to the world community that we've become one team with a shared vision for repairing our battered country and bringing about a better world for our children and their children. In my remarks last night, I gave an overview of our government's economic strategy and how we plan to introduce the structural reforms that will move Afghanistan from an economy that was built on the consumption of foreign aid to one that is built around rising productivity through commercial investment, job creation, and trade. I will not repeat that discussion, but I would like to quickly summarize the main elements of that strategy. The first pillar of the strategy is to raise national productivity by focusing our investments in agriculture, mining, infrastructure, and regional connectivity. And particularly, of course, in human capital. The second pillar is that Afghanistan needs to foster markets where firms compete fairly, where jobs are created, and where value chains provide better access to the capital and knowledge that we need to pursue opportunities in new markets. And the third pillar is that a state focused on development must build partnerships with the private sector that enable growth, and partnerships with our neighbors, near and far, to build regional cooperation for peace, prosperity, and development. It is important to highlight our economic strategy for this meeting and for the people of Afghanistan, because creating jobs and moving the economy forward will underpin the success of our other efforts to build an inclusive and tolerant society. We must strive for both peace and prosperity, but prosperity is not purely an economic concept. The pursuit of a growth must never come at the expense of our values. Our government firmly believes that human rights are not luxuries that can be traded off in order to increase the size of the economy, or set aside indefinitely until the time comes when we can afford them. In a war-torn country like Afghanistan, human rights in building the institutions to ensure that they are respected is as fundamental to successful development as inspiring the private sector or building more hydroelectric dams. It is no accident that for all of our other challenges, Afghanistan is today among the countries in our region with the freest press, the most open for civil society, is given the most autonomy to our Human Rights Commission, where our distinguished leader Sima Samar is with us, and is the most explicitly committed to carrying forward a national policy to advance the rights of women. At a time when even the most developed countries are finding it hard to reconcile their legal obligations to protecting the rights of the refugees with the social, economic, and political challenges they pose, we in the National Unity Government of Afghanistan recognize the fragility of our fundamental freedoms, and will repeat in this and other forums our unwavering commitment to preserving and advancing them. There can be no compromise on our fundamental rights. Chapter 2 of Afghanistan's Constitution on the rights and obligations of citizens is non-negotiable. The Tokyo Mutual Accountability Framework and our own self-reliance strategy draw heavily on global agreements such as the Paris and Accra Declarations and the non-binding Busan Declaration on Development Effectiveness. The core idea of all of these discussions was very simple. Rather than seeing development as a transfer from rich countries to poor ones, mutual accountability would consist of a compact between them that was defined by trust, focus, and delivery. Today's discussion is an assessment of how far we've come since taking office in an effort to reach agreement on the way forward between now and next year's ministerial gatherings. First in Warsaw to discuss security, and then in Brussels to discuss development cooperation. Before we begin the day, I would like to make some comments on how we've been organizing to implement our reform agenda and the roadmap that we see unfolding between now and Brussels next year. Our approach to achieving reform has been institutional. The collaboration between myself and Dr. Abdullah has demonstrated that power is not a zero-sum game, but that can be an exercise in moral responsibility and accountability. Our commitment to constructive politics will be measured by its success in building stable, enduring institutions. I am pleased to inform you that our Electoral Reform Commission, whose distinguished leader, Mr. Akifi, is with us, having worked diligently, has now shared its first set of recommendations. We will have a special cabinet session tonight to consider them. Since Parliament cannot legally change the electoral law in its final year, the electoral law will then be amended by a legislative decree tonight. Thanks to the exemplary work by the Electoral Reform Commission, in the immediate future, we will announce the dates for the parliamentary and district council elections. While not all of the problems of voter lists will be solved in time for the upcoming parliamentary elections, we are totally confident that the 2019 presidential election will be amongst the cleanest held in any country, and especially any developing country. The government of national unity is a success. We have chosen a cabinet that is not just highly qualified, but that is here to make the reform agenda become a reality. In just 6 months, the government has revised or passed more legislation than the past 2 years combined. Key laws or regulations passed have included a revised banking law, electricity laws, and updated procurement laws, and a myriad of others. Every cabinet meeting has a legislative component to it whose purpose is to make the implementation of the self-reliance agenda possible. The first duty of the President of Afghanistan constitutionally is to ensure the application of rule of law. And that's why we are focusing on legislation to get the rules of the game right and then reorganize accordingly. What are these implementation reforms? First and foremost has been to start the process of building a clean, competent government. A big achievement of the past year has been the restructuring of the Capacity Building for Results program, which is now recruiting qualified staff for ministries on the basis of approved resource management plans. And in recognition of this progress, I'm very pleased to have learned that donors will also align their invoicing rates behind the CBR scales so that we can halt and then reverse the brain drain out of government. As I mentioned last night, just a few days ago, we also assigned the responsibility for choosing Director Generals and senior officials to their ministers rather than the Civil Service Commission, so that going forward, our ministers can build their own teams and be accountable for what they deliver. I congratulate Minister Hakimi on this accomplishment because as Minister of Finance, I singly failed to do what he's managed to do. So thank you to all of you. The second key reform area has been to begin reforming the budget process. Afghanistan's budget system served it well when the objective was primarily to track the expenditure being made on projects. It has not been an effective tool in driving national development policies and to support government-led reforms. We must renew our efforts on reform and create a national budget that is less fragmented, more responsive, and which allocates resources based on performance. The new public financial management roadmap will improve the quality of planning, reflect the true costs of government policy decisions, and use better and faster reporting to let the Finance Ministry monitor the quality of implementation. With a better budget system, ministries will be able to spend more effectively with less of the delays and bottlenecks that currently afflict them every step of the way. Importantly, this process will focus on the capacity and performance of people and teams rather than themes, putting a practical face on our goal of self-reliance. The Minister of Finance will have more to say on this over the course of the day. The third key reform has been to accelerate our war against corruption. In London, we promised to make tackling corruption a first-order priority for our government. Over the year, we've launched that war on many fronts. Kabul Bank is no longer a symbol of impotence of government, but a symbol of resolve, as well as defense procurement and range of other examples. We established a National Procurement Commission that I chair every Saturday, in which Dr. Abdullah, VP Danish, and the Ministers of Finance, Justice, and Economy are members, to review all high-value contracts that in the past ended up costing the government hundreds of millions of dollars in inefficient and faulty specifications. We have also made significant changes to how we manage customs. We are increasing our oversight of revenue collection, and we have made major efforts to end the culture of impunity by prosecuting people who steal from the government regardless of their political connections. The fourth key reform has been to reorganize Afghanistan's justice system so that we can begin to manage the country through the respect for rule of law. The Supreme Court, led by our very able Chief Justice, is focusing on its core legal functions and is initiating comprehensive reform. We nominated the first woman to the Supreme Court and I must express my disappointment that she lost by 8 votes. She is one of the most competent legal minds in this country and stands head and shoulders above all the other candidates that I considered. I do hope that our members of parliament will consider merit and not just gender in terms of their decisions. We've launched a review of prosecutors to weed out the many unqualified and even corrupt prosecutors who had infiltrated this critical profession. Recognizing that lack of law, violence, and criminality go in hand, we have formed an interministerial commission to clamp down on narcotics trade and the moral as well as financial corruption that grows with it. There was an attitude a decade ago. Well, we Afghans grow it, others consume it. Well, I have news. We have 3.5 million addicts. And daily, the toll that addiction takes, we are a very tight-knit society. The community values, family values are very high. Today, bridges under Kabul River are full of people who've been disowned by their families and have been thrown out. Producers, processors, traffickers, and consumers must come in a compact to deal with this worldwide phenomenon because none of us can ignore it, and particularly not we, who are suffering in major ways and will lose a generation of our best young people to this addiction. The fifth key reform has been to begin fostering the private sector to stimulate the investment that will create the jobs that this country so badly needs. We've passed bills and negotiated agreements to increase the supply of electricity to Afghanistan, including efforts to advance our use of renewable resources of energy, which is a fundamental precondition for any form of industrial development. We began to streamline business licensing requirements, and we anticipate opening Afghanistan's first one-stop shop for business registration and licensing later this year. Sixth, while the first set of reforms focused on the government, on the ministries, and we implemented our first 100-day plan, the second 100-day plan will focus on relation between ministries and provinces. Minister Popal, our very able leader of local government, the independent local government authority, has been instrumental in preparing provincial prepared plans of reform, and we are moving to implement, and I welcome the governors. I see the governor of Nangarhar, I see the governor of Herat, who spoke to you, the governor of Kandahar, and others who are here. This, again, is a very distinguished and committed group of governors, and 2 women governors who, again, are making history. Governor Surabi was the first woman governor, Minister Surabi, but she's now followed. Oh, she's here. Okay, wonderful. Governor Joya is here? Yes, yeah, of course. Thank you. Over the coming year, our government will be launching a concerted campaign to encourage international and regional companies to make their investments in Afghanistan. We'll dramatically streamline the investment process and cut the red tape that makes even the ongoing conflict pale in significance to the economic damage that we can do to ourselves with bad policies. However, while we welcome and encourage as much foreign investment as possible, for near-term growth and job creation, the much more urgent priority is to create a much better investment climate for Afghanistan's own entrepreneurs and small and medium enterprises. As we wrote in our self-assessment of progress on the self-reliance, we recognize that we need to send a sharper, clearer signal to investors that this government is serious about growth. I would therefore like to open this workshop by making the following announcements. The Afghanistan Investment Support Agency and the Ministry of Commerce and Industries will increase its consultations with the Afghan Chamber of Commerce and Industry and the Afghan Industries Association sectoral and representatives of small, medium, and women-owned enterprises. I and the National Economic Council will personally review the recommendations and then take them to the Cabinet. We will submit to the Cabinet a reform to increase the standard length of business licenses from 1 year to 3 years as part of a large-scale overhaul of the licensing and registration process. As part of our Invest Afghanistan campaign, we will work with ISA to review and possibly eliminate the requirement for a tax clearance letter in order to renew a business license. We will ask Cabinet to approve and support the Afghan Revenue Department's plan to overhaul its human resources system, which would both improve our fiscal sustainability and reduce corruption. Last week, the Cabinet approved Minister Hakimi's very ambitious and comprehensive plan to overhaul the human resources of the Customs Department. No one will serve in the Customs Department unless he or she is a graduate of the Customs Academy and totally transparently recruited. The Ministry of Finance will form an interministerial and interdepartmental committee for tax policy chaired by His Excellency Hakimi to review, discuss, and reach agreement on any new tax policy and reform proposals before they are submitted to the Cabinet. This would help ensure that all relevant stakeholders are consulted before new policies are introduced, and it will mitigate duplicative processes across departments and ministries. Consultation, however, is not a veto right. The private sector needs to respond to a favorable environment and needs to really partner and not insist on perpetuation of deals that are based on patronage. But every policy will be based on full consultation. The implications will be costed and clearly communicated. However, it is the responsibility of the government to make the ultimate decisions so that balancing of all stakeholders can take place and not just solely one section. To encourage investment in telecommunications, private telecom companies will be allowed access to the optical fiber cable backbone. To promote the development of gas reserves, we will soon announce an initiative to revive investor confidence and future interest in developing the Shibirghan gas fields. The process for applying contractor payments will be streamlined to reduce the number of steps and speed up payment. Every procurement contract will be tied up to a very clear schedule of payment. Delivery and payment will be matched. The seventh key reform has been to advance work on social inclusion and in particular on the protection and advancement of women's rights. Earlier this year, we launched the seminal Women, Peace and Security paper and have committed to implement its recommendations in full. We have also moved ahead with our commitment to bring women into the senior ranks of government, and I'm very pleased that our four distinguished women colleagues, Minister Uriakhil, Minister Moman, Minister Nazari, and Minister Azimi are with us and are leading very significant portfolios. As I said, I nominated a woman to the Supreme Court, and I want to make sure that during the next 2 years, next year, another 3 judges are going to retire from the Supreme Court. We can be the first to have a woman in the Supreme Court. We are very fortunate that we have 249 women judges, and I'm privileged that about 100 of them were sworn by me this year. Our government is taking sharp action to bring an end to acts of violence against women. And during our preparatory discussion, we agreed to extend the coverage of shelters for abused women to the entire country. Finally, last week, our cabinet endorsed the economic empowerment for women as one of our national priority programs. As one of the early originators of the concept of mutual accountability, I had a hand in drafting the Paris Declaration. I know full well the pitfalls of taking ambiguous phrases too literally. Nevertheless, we Afghans can be quite literal people. Partnerships evolve. I'm extremely pleased that your technical teams and ours had such wide-ranging and deep discussions over how the partnership can evolve to support self-reliance. In particular, your agreement to support our public financial management reform program by considering opportunities for providing the flexibility that is needed as the performance management systems take root is deeply appreciated. But as those of you who know me from my years as finance minister, nothing in these discussions has brought me as much joy as our agreement to align salary scales for Afghan staff so that we can all compete for talent on a level playing field. And I'd like to both thank our teams and congratulate them for achieving what I could not 12 years ago. Traveling to Brussels. What is it that our partners can expect by the time that we reconvene in Brussels next year? We called our progress report the first mile because we recognize that the road ahead will be long and full of curves and potholes. Success is far from guaranteed, and before we open today's discussion, I would like to emphasize to you the seriousness of the current lack of jobs. We are a country where 3% of our population is above 60 and 30% of our population is below 50. Poverty is the driver of instability. You cannot have citizenship based on such disparity in wealth and opportunity. And we must focus on the type of growth that can truly bring about an end to poverty, but immediately jobs, jobs, and jobs are our priority. Afghanistan is not Greece. Our economic contraction has not come from bad policy choices. We have not shied away from negotiating serious reforms with our international partners, but our prospects for implementing the economic adjustment that I've summarized last night and this morning will be considerably reduced if we cannot find a way in the short term to create jobs for our people while the reforms take hold. A government is not a private company. It cannot just be driven by the bottom line. A government's basic assumption is legitimacy and buy-in. And the coalitions that are necessary for reform must be assembled and put together so we can move coherently and comprehensively. And the public must understand that reforms are to their benefits and to the benefits of their children and children's benefit. As the President of Afghanistan, I'm firmly of the view that we need to work with you, our international partners, who've come to Kabul for this workshop to find ways to soften the impact of the poorest of structural adjustment that we must and will be made. We need to improve how we target public investment to crowd in private investment, not to crowd in private investment, and maximize the immediate benefits that flow to our people. We cannot simply abandon the poor today in pursuit of long-term prosperity tomorrow. Over the course of our discussions today, we believe that you will see that reform is underway. I will leave it to our ministers to explain their own plans for delivering the results that our agenda is promised. But before opening this workshop for general discussion, I would like to make 3 explicit commitments that you can use to hold me and my government to account. The first promise is that by the time of the Brussels gathering, the government of Afghanistan will have produced a credible budget. Not only would its assumptions reflect the reality of our economic situation, but by Brussels, our revenue figures will be showing realistic rise in the economy will be starting to recover. The second promise is that Afghanistan will be moving up the human rights scale, and in particular, will be bringing a positive story about the advancement of women's rights across the country. This again, I'd like to thank our Minister of Repatriation and Refugees for very ably leading negotiations with both our neighbors, where 5 million of our people are, we are tackling comprehensively the issue of refugees and their honorable, voluntary return to Afghanistan. I personally chair the Council on Repatriation, and our promise is to make the word internally displaced deleted from our political and social vocabulary. Our commitment to justice lies at the very heart of our religion and our culture, and the marginalization of women will no longer be tolerated. The third promise is that provided that we have a willing partner, peace discussions will have advanced and a serious dialogue to end the killings will be underway. Let me turn it then to security. I cannot open this workshop on development without acknowledging the critical role that our armed forces is playing to defend the country and provide the security umbrella without which all talk of development loses meaning. Their success and the success of development for Afghanistan are inextricable. Afghanistan is a country under attack by forces who believe in none of the values that we will be discussing in this workshop today, whether they be women's rights in development or peaceful cooperation with our neighbors in the region and the world, or an end to narcotics that underwrites their criminalized politics. It is no coincidence that the road to Brussels passes through Warsaw. We are committed to Afghanistan's national development need and appreciate the support and learning that our partners with resolute support have provided us. And we continue to acknowledge the brave commitment shown by our foundational ally, the United States, to helping us resist the spread of extremism and terror in our country and across Asia. We would also like to thank every member that contributed to NATO, ISAF mission, and those who are contributing to the current Resolute Support Mission. Our goal is to turn the Resolute Support Mission to an enduring partnership, and we are confident that together we can overcome the challenges. But let me remind you that last year, a lot of people were saying that the Afghan security forces will disappear like puff and will not be able. This is a country of patriots. We have defended this country for 5,000 years, and let me assure you, we will defend and honor and our independence for the next 5,000 years. Let me stop here and hand the baton over to my very capable cabinet and colleagues. I know that you will have a fruitful and exciting discussion. Afghanistan is on the move. I wish you all of the best, and I look forward to reconvening in Brussels a year from now so that I can present the highlight of all of the results that would have delivered over the years. You are indispensable to delivery, to generation of hope, and to ensuring that the Afghan people know that we are not alone, but also the Afghan people know that we must own the responsibility for the future ourselves, because no partnership will work unless the partner that is in need and is articulating the future can own the future and commit to it. Thank you.